I was not too high on this series coming into it. I was not too thrilled with Mando season 3, so my expectations weren't incredibly high here. With that being said, the first 2 episodes were probably the best. I feel like they set up a good foundation, developed our characters with some quirks, and some obvious strengths and weaknesses. With that being said, my biggest problem with the series is I felt the time was mismanaged. It was 8 episodes, but it felt more like 5, and the runtimes were a lot shorter than they should have been. We had one episode that was basically 30 minutes, another one that was basically 35 minutes. That can't not be runtimes for shows. When shows would air on cable, they would air for an hour. And I know you're probably thinking, oh, there's commercials. Most of those runtimes were still about 50 minutes, at least. I don't understand why we're having 30-minute runtimes for an 8-episode show that hasn't even announced a season 2. This could be it. I know it's probably not, but this could be it for the Ahsoka series. A lot of people took issue with Sabine basically becoming a Jedi. I thought it was fine. I thought it was cool that she would get her training. I thought the way she used the Force was pretty ridiculous. It's not as bad as this. It kind of just made it seem like she could use the Force like if she just believed hard enough.
It kind of felt like the Force was a cheat code for her, especially the way she was able to control it so easily without practicing that much.
I never thought about that as being the Force. I know we've seen scenes where people can use the Force better when they're angry or when they have a lot of emotions, but those are typically extremely Force sensitive people. And I understand that every being has the Force within them, but this should have taken her a lot longer to learn how to use. I loved Sabine's character the first 3-4 episodes, but basically once she gave the map to Baylan, her character just kind of went out the window. She's kind of resorted to being a child again. She was being snarky, everything was sarcasm. I feel like she was developing to become more mature and to think before she acts. It's not a bad thing to joke around, but it kind of was all her character became. Sabine was the most developed and fleshed out character in this series, but even that wasn't saying too much. And it was just really unfortunate to watch because she just became predictable. And I hate when characters become predictable. I like understanding who they are and kind of finding their identity, but it doesn't mean I should be able to predict like everything they're gonna do. Which brings me to Baylan and Shin. Those characters created an identity from the very beginning that they were gonna do what they felt was right. So when Baylan kind of leaves at the end, no one really predicted that Baylan was just gonna walk away from Thrawn and basically just stay on this planet. But when he did do it, it made sense because his character established that he was basically gonna do whatever the hell he wanted to do. And he was going to make sure that he was going to listen to the voices calling out to him. It was more important than this war. It was really more important than his apprentice. Baylan was probably my favorite character, and he was even underused a little bit, but again, it's 8 episodes, so I'm not terribly upset because, how much can you fit into that? Of course, it is terrible that we have lost Rey too, so I don't know what his character is going to become. I don't know if they're just going to write him out or recast. I would be really surprised if they recasted him, but I would probably expect him to be written out if they do end up doing a season 2. Shin was a cool character from the beginning too. She was kind of like the anti-Sabine, just another naive character, and I thought that they would just kind of go at it the entire season. And when that first fight happens in episode 2, it kind of makes it seem like they're gonna fight several more times. They fought in that scene, that was great. They fought again in the woods, that was also really cool. I feel like we could have gotten some more scenes then of Shin and Sabine fighting, or some more scenes of Baylan, more scenes of Ahsoka. Just show us more of these characters. And that kind of brings me to Ahsoka's character. In this series, we get to see her take on the master role, which is something that we hadn't seen from her. I really was fine with Ahsoka's character for the most part. She was a little dull, but it was nice to see towards the end of the series, episode 6, 7, and 8, when she started becoming a little bit more lively after that conversation with Anakin that I'll get to in a little bit. The only critique I'd really had for her and most of the series was that the fighting was really slow. This is something that's probably been beaten to death in every video that you've heard, so I'm not going to crush it too much, but it definitely was slow. It took me out of it a little bit. It felt kind of like Game of Thrones, those kind of sword fights that had long strides and slow movements, which worked well in that show, but not really here, especially the fights between Baylan and Ahsoka. These were 2 Jedi that were trained during the peak of the Republic. They are supposed to be the fastest, the most prepared Jedi. I know they're older, but still it felt a little off. That brings me to Morgan Elsbeth. I actually like Morgan. I think she was a fine character. Ezra was fine. I thought he was a little underused, but overall fine. Thrawn was fantastic. If one thing Star Wars has done right, they had done a really great job at creating menacing villains. Between Moff Gideon, between Thrawn, these characters have just been really menacing and really overall done well. Even Kylo Ren in the sequels, for all of its flaws, was written really well. I wish we honestly saw more of Thrawn. I understand like he wasn't the main part of the series, so we'll probably see him more in the next series or next film, whatever we see him in next. And the last character I want to talk about is Anakin Skywalker. We all knew he was going to appear in the show because we heard his voice in the trailer, but it was unsure how he was going to be used. Was he going to fight with Ahsoka at the Jedi Temple on Mustafar? We weren't really sure. So it was great to see him give her one final teaching lesson in the Clone Wars. This was honestly probably one of the places that people really didn't expect to see them, because you would have to extremely de-age Ahsoka, and they just turned out they were just going to recast her and make it when she was a younger teenager. The lesson overall to save her from basically giving up on herself and those around her was really moving. I thought the episode was probably the best in the series, and I honestly wish we saw more of it. Again, this comes back to my biggest problem with Hera and Jace, is that the scenes kept cutting out to Jace and Syndulla hearing them fighting in the world between worlds. It was obviously the B plot of the episode, but it really just took me out of it. I wish they had used that 10 or so minutes of screen time to give us another action scene.
See more flashbacks of Anakin and Ahsoka. Did the Jason, Syndulla, and Hera scenes really change that much in the episode? Did it really change that much in the overall story?
It felt like a series with good moments, but overall fairly lackluster episodes. The season itself should have significant impact, and the runtime should be used with quality. Well, I do feel like the show had some great moments. I loved episodes 1 and 2. I loved the sequence with Anakin. I loved meeting Thrawn and seeing more of Baylan and Shin. I understand why Disney is doing this. They want to create more series because the box office, they use the box office as kind of a crutch as why they don't make films anymore. But in reality, shows keep audiences subscribed to Disney Plus. It isn't a coincidence that when one show ends, another one picks up. We even just saw it here the second Ahsoka ended, Loki came out. They want to keep you subscribed to make money, and I know it's not things that Star Wars fans want to hear, but it's been the truth. And we kind of noticed it in season 3 of Mandalorian, we noticed it in Book of Boba Fett, that these seasons have episodes and large portions of episodes, just a few great moments that the hardcore fanboys will love, and I can like to consider myself one of those, but I wasn't blindly in love with this series. There really aren't a whole lot of projects coming up, but at the end of Ahsoka season 2, we see the Mortis gods. Now, the gods of Mortis appeared in season 3 of the Clone Wars, and in Star Wars, there aren't a whole lot of godly figures. It isn't something that was really ever mentioned in the original trilogy. It wasn't something that was mentioned in the prequels, and it wasn't even really mentioned in Clone Wars outside of 3 episodes that Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka find themselves in this alternate dimension or galaxy, that they meet these 3 Mortis gods, the father, who is the embracer of balance, the daughter, the embodiment of good, and the son, who's the acolyte of evil. Now, Anakin was supposed to become the father, which I guess he kind of did because he brought balance to the Force. Those are the statues we see at the end of Ahsoka. We see the father and we see the son. And the daughter, her head is missing on the statue, which is a resemblance that she is dead. And basically what Baylan is probably looking to find is the mother, Aboth. The mother wasn't mentioned in the show like at all, and that's the light, the temple that Baylan sees at the end of the finale. So maybe she's the final Thanos boss of this universe that's supposed to wrap everything up. I mean, literally none of these characters outside of Luke appear in the sequel trilogy. Filoni and Disney has to do something to make that make sense. Does she come in and literally just kill everybody? That is definitely a possibility. Will that happen? Like I mentioned before, these characters make a lot of money for Disney, so I don't know. Or will they just stretch it out over several more seasons and movies, which is what I think that they'll probably do. And I'll be honest, I don't know how Ahsoka and Sabine get back to their main galaxy. Is there a portal in the temple? Most likely. They're gonna find a way to portal back, or maybe use another star whale to get back. Because it was really weird that Ahsoka and Sabine felt that they saved Ezra. Meanwhile, they just switched places. Didn't really feel like saving to me. It felt more like sacrificing. A little unfulfilling if you ask me, but whatever. People thought that Anakin was the son. The son was impersonating him. That's why his robes and his hand looks different than in Return of the Jedi. So I don't know if I believe that as much. I don't think Disney would take that big of a swing. They really don't anymore. I do feel like we will see the son and the father in these upcoming shows or movies. I feel like they probably will, because they're such fascinating characters that there's like gods in this universe that are barely ever talked about. It's actually really crazy that this is part of Star Wars now. Overall, I'll give this series a generous 6.5 out of 10. It was great visually. There were some great characters and great moments. I feel like the runtime wasn't used properly, and that's a little upsetting. Overall, it was a decent series that produced some great moments, and I guess if I'm being optimistic, it does set up for a season 2 or a movie in this greater Mandoverse. So until the next video, let me know what you thought about Ahsoka and what you're looking forward to seeing next.